I'm calling on behalf of the Trilon Microcinema, their blog Perisphere, and the other blog All Star Video, with Jeff Hayne, who works for Mill Creek Entertainment. Jeff, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I appreciate you taking an interest in our products.
Excellent. So the Trilon will be playing. We've got a bunch of kaiju stuff coming up in August, and we're playing a few of your titles.
Yeah.
So we have Daimajin and some of the Gamera stuff, right? Is that right?
Yes, those are the two different series of films I believe you guys showed the most interest in, and I'm glad. They're awesome movies.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. So where are you from? How did you get interested in movies in the first place?
Good question. I'm a military brat. So I grew up all over the United States. My family moved every 2 or 3 years, and my folks decided to retire around the time I was going into high school because they'd seen my brother and sister both go to multiple high schools and how challenging that was for them growing up. So my dad decided he had an option to move to Italy to take command of a base in Naples and or retire, and he took the retirement option. And much to my dismay, because I thought, we'll move to Naples and I'll learn Italian and I'll get to bring home a cheap Ferrari, But it didn't quite work out in my 14-year-old brain the way I thought it would work. And we moved instead to Volga, South Dakota, and I went from having a class size of around 1,300 in my previous school to 52 in Volga, South Dakota, and so it was a little bit of a cultural shock for me. And I think it was probably all those times when we moved, and every time we moved, it was during the summer that we would move to a new town, and I would my friends would be the movies that were playing in the theater nearby, and so I spent a lot of time catching up on old movies and new movies because I didn't know anybody. That was how I got interested, probably.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense. I think a lot of people that I remember moving and just sitting and watching tons and tons of movies. That makes sense. So did you, where in South Dakota were you?
A little town called Volga, South Dakota. It's about 45 miles, I guess, north of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is the one that everybody's pretty much familiar with, the big city.
Yeah, that's where I grew up.
If you will.
So.
Oh, you did? Okay, so my wife grew up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, so we both met each other when we went to South Dakota State. And I went to South Dakota State because I was given a small scholarship for communications studies, and I thought, well, if I'm going to get into the entertainment business in one way or the other, I better figure out how to do that. So I went to school for communications studies and theater with an emphasis on stage theater. And at the time, I thought I would be an actor. I was going to be a big movie star. And my wife, obviously, she was also in the same program, and she was actually the one that had talent as opposed to me, who just had a lot of excitement. I was excited about it, but I don't know how talented I was. So, but she was a genuinely very talented actress. So that's how I met her. And then, gosh, did you ask how I got into the entertainment industry?
Yeah. So your parents were moving you around a lot, and then so when you were you met your wife.
Yep.
And you guys were in college. Yeah. How did you end up making that transition from being in school to actually working in the entertainment business?
So it's kind of a long story, but I'll give you the real short version. The gist of it is that right before my senior year of college, I was working at a bar in Brookings, South Dakota, bartending over the summer, and all my friends were in the repertory theater company, but I just decided I needed a summer off from doing theater just to kind of rejuvenate myself, and so I was just working at a local, little pub or whatever, and really restaurant more than a pub, and and I just another one of my buddies who's also a theater guy was going out fishing, and he was like, "Hey man, you should meet me after work." And so I went out, met him after work, and unfortunately, driving home in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota, I was involved in a car accident by myself, and I broke my back, and so I was obviously then paralyzed after that. I'm a paraplegic, so I started going out to. As a part of my degree, actually, my communications degree, I created an internship for myself, if you will, as a speaker, right? And so I started going out, and we're talking, this is like 3 months post-injury. I started going out to second and third grade classrooms and talking about disabilities and self-esteem and kind of accepting everybody for who they were. And I tried to focus on classrooms that had a kid with a disability, and because it was the beginning of the school year, that was kind of a really good thing, not only for me, but I think for the kids, and in doing that, the Argus Leader picked up a story on me and ran it, and as small as this world is, a guy out in Los Angeles, David Catlin, owned a company called Brentwood Home Video, and Brentwood Home Video was kind of a very kind of affectionately I say this, a cheesy little home video distributor that had like they had 8 films, and I think Moon of the Wolf was one of them. You know what I mean? Like, where it was a very humble offering, if you will. And they had 8 movies, and they said, we're gonna do this thing where we put movies into collections based on the genre, and it's not something that's been done before, and we're gonna make a splash. And so this is like 2001, and so anyway, David Catlin calls me out of the blue. This is like a week after I graduated from college. I had just taken a job as the co-manager of the theater company that I was just referencing prior, Prairie Repertory Theater Company. And it's a great theater company, and they're still in business, and they're doing great things. And it's a great way for college kids to get professional experience, if you will. So, and I highly recommend the program. Even if you don't have to go to school at South Dakota State. I mean, you can just, anybody from U of M or anywhere. I mean, they have so many kids from all over the country now that are coming there for the experience of working in a theater, So, highly recommend it. But anyway, so I just accepted a job doing that, and then I get this phone call, and it was like a week after graduation. I mean, I think I was literally like sitting around having a beer with my buddies with no plans in life really other than showing up to work in a week, And I certainly had no plans after that summer. And so I get this phone call, and it's this guy, he's like, hey, I read a little story about you, and I'd like to offer you a job in Los Angeles, And I was like, I literally said, who is this? I thought it was somebody pulling my chain, And he was like, my name's David Catlin. I already told you that, And I'm like, oh Lord, this is not a joke, So I straightened out my act and had an impromptu 10-minute conversation with the guy about, who I was, I guess, and then he was like, well, let me talk to my partners because I think you're a good fit, and like I got a phone call the next day, and he offered me a job, and more money than I thought was possible for a theater graduate to make, and which in the grand scheme of things was actually a very, very small amount of money, but at the time,
at that point, you're like, wow.
I thought I was going to make $1,000 that summer, you know what I mean? So anything above that was a gold mine. So I moved out to LA. I guess this is now 9 months post-injury, and I couldn't find a place to live, so I lived in a Motel 6 for a while, and finally found an accessible apartment. And then my girlfriend from South Dakota, she finished the repertory theater that she was in over the summer and moved out with me, and she then got into the business of acting out there, and I did a little bit of that as well, just kind of for fun. I did like an episode of Scrubs and an episode of Boston Public, and some of it was background talent, some of it was glorified black background talent stuff. I did a Old Spice commercial and a California Department of Energy commercial, all this other goofy stuff. And in the process of doing that, I learned a couple things. Number one, actors out there might as well be popcorn. Nobody cares, right? The producers, the directors, the writers, the casting directors, they just don't care about you. And it's not their fault. They've just been jaded by 100 years of every person they meet is wants to be a famous actor. I mean, you're talking the guy who changes your oil all the way to the woman who serves your coffee. I mean, they all want to be actors, right? So I realized that I didn't want to be that kind of popcorn. I wanted, and so in my mind, I was like, okay, wait a minute. Who hires the actor? Okay. But who hires the casting director? Okay, well, who hires the director? Okay, who hires the producer? Oh, the executive producer? That's the job I want, right? So I figured out that I wanted to be the person who came up with the idea of the film or the television show or the documentary, and I wanted to be the person who hired everyone and told them exactly what I wanted to look like, feel like, and sound like, and that's how I would be able to make movies and enjoy them, not by being a part of the cast and crew, if you will.
Sure.
And so, it was that process of working for BCI Clips and getting started in the film business that got me really excited about home video and kind of what it meant. And it was probably it was probably a year after I'd been working there that I was on the phone with a filmmaker who'd licensed us some movies, and he called with some gripe of some sort or another. Not to demean filmmakers, but it was a common occurrence, if you will, for a filmmaker to want something special.
Sure. So there's maybe, yeah.
Yeah, like we didn't, but we put a film with a film he didn't like or something, you know what I mean? And so I talked this guy down from the cliff, if you will, and he was so mad, and little did I know that David and my mentor Ed Getz were sitting behind me during this call, right? And so I get off the phone and they're like, Jeff, you got a minute? And they're like, come on in here and shut the door. And I'm like, oh no, you know, I'm 21 years old and terrified, you know, 22 maybe, and I go in there and David says, "Hey, this is meant to be a compliment. You're a hell of a lot better with your mouth than a spreadsheet, you know." And I was like, well, thank you. I think, you know. So they said we're gonna have you do the acquisitions and contracts now. And I was like, well, that sounds good, you know. And and so they said to me, you know, we're going to start sending you to the film festivals and television conferences, and basically we want you to go out there and we want you to find stuff for us to sell. And I said, well, what do you want me to find? And they said, stuff you like. And I was like, what does that mean? And they were like, go to the show, look for things you like. And I was like, oh, it's that simple. Okay, so that's what I did. Yeah, that's what I did.
Nice.
I'm not an encyclopedia for film. I did not go to a film school where I had to know every film that was ever made and the director and the producer and the writer of the film.
Sure.
But I know people, right? And I know people because I moved every 2 years and I had to make friends with new people every 2 years. And I realized that people were virtually the same no matter where you lived in the country, and we all had kind of a common theme when it came to our entertainment, and so I got a feel for what people liked. By knowing and meeting people, and so I'm a pop culture guy, right? So when I was at my first big show in France, and I'm looking around the convention center, and I see this little poster on the wall, this company called Entertainment Rights, and it's got this picture of my favorite cartoon character from 1985, He-Man, right? And I roll over to this lady, and I'm like, "Do you guys have the rights to He-Man?" And she was like, "Oh, yes, we do," you know. And I'm like, and it's never been released on DVD. Is there a reason? She's like, oh, well, we're here marketing it. Would you be interested in it? And I was like, yes, I would, you know. And she was like, so we've already got offers, you know. And I was like, throw them away. This is mine, you know. And she was like, what? And I was like, seriously, like we're going to get this. We're going to make a deal, and you're going to have a lot of success with us. And she was like, but you guys don't really have much. And I was like, that's because we haven't had a chance. You know, so I talked to this company into licensing us to He-Man, and it was like a skyrocket. I mean, it was such a big seller for us. I mean, we sold just silly amounts of He-Man on DVD. And then we convinced the good people over at Disney to give us Dungeons and Dragons as a follow-up, and that was a huge success as well. So then the train just started rolling, you know. It really just started rolling from there, and it's been good ever since.
Excellent. And so do you kind of curate the collection? So when you started in like the home video stuff and you were curating smaller collections based on genre, are you doing similarly now? Like I'm looking at the Mill Creek catalog in the last few days, and there's like some spaghetti western collections, and then there's like, you know, collection stuff for like infants. And are you kind of seeing what you think, well, you know, we can kind of get into this crowd through this, and we can put these films together because they're similar themes? And then and how you, so maybe talk me through how you pick a film, and then how you decide what to put it with.
Sure. Okay, so in terms of the determination of the film, it usually has a pretty solid list of criteria that I'm looking for in terms of why I want something, right? Of films that are in the action genre that don't have a star, you're crazy. They're not going to sell, right? Whereas you could put together a set of spaghetti westerns where there isn't necessarily a recognizable star by American standards, but the cult fan base that goes looking for those things is going to recognize the people, right? So, hey, does the genre work? You know, and to my point, what I just said, collectability. You know, does the content have a built-in fan base? You know, is there a fan site? If it's, you know, kind of a marginal kind of following, is there something that we could do to make it more collectible, right? So like He-Man, you know, even though we've released the whole complete series this year, we went back and we made a really collectible version that was numbered, that had a sword from Mattel included and a booklet included that we did with the people over at Classic Media, and you know, so we make it collectible. Nostalgia, you know, does the content elicit an emotional response? You know what I mean? Is there star power? Can we package the product in a way that will give it shelf presence? You know what I mean? Is there an opportunity to do multiple volumes of a product and or multiple collections of the same theme, if you will, that would make it more identifiable on the shelf.
Sure.
And then value, you know what I mean? No matter what Mill Creek does, we always want to have a product to have a value connotation. And even if it's $100 product, we want that $100 product to make it to feel like it's $500 worth of content, right? So if we're going to sell, I mean, we sell like that 70s show season 1 for $9.99 because it was released by Anchor Bay, 7 years ago at $49.99, and really by today's standards, if you wanted it on DVD, you'd be willing at an impulse kind of point in your shopping, be willing to drop 10 or $15 on a season of something that you like but don't necessarily aren't a huge fan of. So we go after that customer, if you will.
Yeah, and has that changed? I mean, I know that the DVD boom has come and gone. Home video is kind of struggling. Is it changing what you pick because people are buying kind of less physical media?
You'd be surprised, right? So, like, the thing I say to friends and family when they ask me about, the DVD industry, as I say, the current Netflix subscriber base is around 30 million, which is a huge number.
Yep.
Luckily for Mill Creek, that leaves 90% of the rest of the country. Because there's over 300 million people in North America. And in Minneapolis, you and me, John, we're watching Netflix, we're watching Hulu, we're watching Vudu. I'm picking up things and watching them on iTunes, on Apple TV. I mean, I'm acquiring my content in a variety of digital ways. But when it comes to owning content, I'm still buying DVDs here and there, and the reason is because it's a collectible factor that I want to own it and touch it and feel it and have it on my shelf.
Absolutely.
You combine that customer, the high-end digital consumer that's also purchasing physical goods. You combine that with the majority, and I mean the majority of the country, who does not believe that owning something digitally is really owning something. Mill Creek's got a long and healthy life. I mean, it's crazy because really, I mean, the digital boom occurred a long time ago, and it's still continuing to obviously play out, and we're in that space. Trust me, we're on iTunes, we're on Hulu, we're on Roku, we're on Netflix, we're on Vudu. We've got our own, we've got 2 of our own channels on Roku, and obviously it's because we have to be diverse in our offering, right? We also have to have a number of different revenue streams from every different possible platform for our intellectual property. But with that said, again, mom and pop retail stores across this country would tell you that people are still buying DVDs, and it's people both on the kind of the late adopters, the ones who finally got rid of their VCR in 2006 because it finally conked out and they couldn't find someone to fix it, so they're like, I guess we'll get DVDs. It's that consumer. It's the consumer who doesn't have cable and doesn't have internet and doesn't have, you know what I mean? Because obviously we all think these things are kind of like entitled to us, but the majority of the country can't afford them. And that's just a fact, And so we try to provide a value entertainment option for all consumers, whether it's a high-end consumer who likes to, buy collectible stuff, or it's a consumer who acquires most of their entertainment content via physical goods because they don't have internet and or they don't have whatever it is, an internet-connected device at home that would allow them to do so. So, yeah, I mean, literally, it's evidenced by the fact that Mill Creek has had a 20+% growth. I mean, double-digit growth for 5 years straight.
So people are that's interesting. I mean, like, because I know, like, personally, the website that I help write for All Star Video, it's all about, like, both of us are pretty obsessed with the actual physical media. Like, we love, the actual DVD, the art, holding it, touching it. And I definitely know that there are some people who, have decided they're not going to buy anything. So, like, it's all available. I can get it any time I want. But it's nice to hear the things that people are still buying physical things. There's still something that they want to own.
Well, they certainly are. And, I try to remind people. So I won't name the platform and I won't name the series because it's not worth it. But my boss is a very intelligent guy. He likes to make sure he understands every single way that consumers can acquire movies and TV, right? So he understands them, so he can speak to them, and or we can compete with them. And he was telling me he's telling me how he has digital subscriptions, or he has perpetual licenses, if you will, to like hundreds of TV shows and hundreds of movies. I mean, it's probably 1,000 movies on this one platform, right? And he was talking to me about how great it is and how he loves being able to access it at any time. until about 4 weeks ago when he went to watch a series that he had bought about 6 months prior. And I say bought because he believed he purchased it. And he went to watch the first season. And it said content temporarily unavailable. And he was like, well, what do you mean content temporarily unavailable? I own it. I bought it. I can watch it whenever I want to watch it.
It's always available to me. Right.
Unfortunately, what you don't know is when you click that little box on every little digital platform that you're, quote-unquote, buying content from, what you're getting is a perpetual license. That perpetual license is obviously subject to any and all challenges that they may have and allows them, if necessary, because you checked the box, to pull the content offline if there's a dispute about the chain of title or the ownership of the title, right? So this season they've had the studio who licensed it to this platform had an issue with the platform. The platform had an issue with the studio, so they had to temporarily pull it off the market while they figured out their problem. Well, guess what? Everybody who bought it realized that they didn't own anything. What they had done is equivalent to going to Walmart, paying $20 for a brand new Superman DVD, walking out of the store where there's a guy who has a house and it says, store your DVDs here and you can watch them whenever you want, wherever you are, and handing him your DVD and being like, I hope he lives there for a long time. You know what I mean? Because if he moves and or he gets shut down and or goes bankrupt, well, what do you have? Nothing.
Yeah, it's just super temporary, right? Like that's the nature of streaming in general. Like you'll even see like those if you have a subscription to Netflix, there'll be certain titles that'll be available for a certain amount of time. And it's like you put value into Netflix because, I want to see those titles and I can, but then they're gone. It's like, that's really interesting. I think that's
my example with Netflix is actually a little bit it's anecdotal, but it's funny. I'm a Netflix subscriber because I want to know what's going on. Obviously, I have content on there, but let's just pretend I'm not in the industry, and let's just pretend I bought Netflix for what I actually used it most for, which is for my twin 2.5-year-old boys. So these guys every morning, they want to grab their smoothie and their blankie, and they want to hang out on mom and dad's bed and watch Netflix while we get ready, right? Which is great for everybody. However, one morning, and I should have known this was coming. I actually did know it was coming, but I'd forgotten. I turned on Netflix, and guess what? Dora's gone, and Diego's gone, and Caillou's gone, and all the Nickelodeon Disney shows are just gone. And I swear to you, if I had not had Amazon Instant Prime, also on my internet-connected device that I just instantly went to and popped on Diego and Dora, there would have been a revolt at my home. There would have been a straight up revolt, and there's no you don't get a letter in the mail that's like, hey, we see that you watch this content literally 3 times a day every day and have done so for 2 years. Just to let you know that that's not going to be included in your subscription anymore as of tomorrow, right? That they don't do that. They don't want you to know, right? So you don't. You think you have ownership in these platforms, and you don't. And I'm not disparaging the platforms because I acquire content from them as well. I'm just saying that as a consumer, you have to know your rights, right? And if I'm going to buy something and I want to make sure that I own it for life, I'm probably going to buy it on Blu-ray.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. And so then when you guys buy the rights for something, do you buy both theatrical and home video distribution generally? Or is it, how does that work?
We're getting pretty limited home video distribution rights, along with the equivalent home video digital distribution rights, and we're getting usually pretty long-term home video licenses, both in North America as well as just the United States. But most of my stuff's North America, and we focus on U.S. and Canada, obviously.
Yeah. So like when something plays at like the Trilon, for instance, like do you have the theatrical rights to what's playing there? Like did we go through you to find those films?
Nope. So you guys contacted us, and then I reached out to the owner of the content, and I said, what do you think? Should we do this? And he said, hey, I think it's a great promotional opportunity, so go for it. And what he usually does, he told me, is he'll charge us especially if it's a small venue that just wants to do it because they're fans. He'll just kind of charge them $100 fee, just so people don't get into the habit of thinking they can just do that for free. So it'd be like $100, send it to me when you got it, So and obviously it's different on newer films, but when we're talking about something, like a Gamma or a Daimajin that was, literally created 40 years ago, it's a little different.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, so what would you say is some of your favorite films that like you've worked with this for a long time? Like, what holds up is what you really love still?
It's a good question. It's a really good question. I am a fan of a lot of the classics, right? And I mean like the '80s classics because that's what I grew up with, right? You know, like I'm a Stand By Me and a Goonies guy. I'm a you know yeah. Even though I don't have the rights to any of these films, I'm a Lord of the Rings guy and a Harry Potter guy. And I mean, like I like big sweeping action, epic films. You know, I'm a sucker for an epic action adventure movie.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Of course, like I said, I really appreciate the interest, John.